So, I was humbly browsing Twitter when someone complaining about the Critical Role finale spoiled Critical Role for me. So, that's nice. Look, it is my fault for looking at Twitter, but at the same time, it gives me an opportunity to talk about the finale that I haven't quite seen yet, though I've looked up enough information that I get the gist of what's going on at this point, and I do want to talk about it because this complaint that I've occasionally seen around with Critical Role is something that I think is a growing issue in Dungeons & Dragons and fiction in general. So, let's talk about consequences. Okay, so what's this complaint? Well, it revolves around Mollymauk Tealeaf and the character of Kingsley. So, what am I talking about here? Well, if you're unaware, Mollymauk Tealeaf is a player character who died early on in Critical Role Campaign 2. Later on, Matt Mercer, the Dungeon Master, brought Mollymauk back in a way. His body was revived in a different form, a different incarnation of the character named Lucian, a villainous incarnation of the character that became the campaign's penultimate bad guy. Matt played him amazingly. Lucian was a really fun character and a cool take on the character that Taliesin ended up building. It was established that Mollymauk was sort of like a portion of Lucian's personality, an aspect of him in a way. And in that sense, Mollymauk was still dead. The consequences of Mollymauk's death were retained. Now, the party ultimately beat Lucian in the final battle of the campaign. Well, the sort of final battle in the campaign. Apparently there's a fight after that. But anyway, point is, they beat Lucian, and they resurrected the character as another personality, Kingsley. Mollymauk turned into Lucian and then turned into Kingsley, another new incarnation of the character, a different person in a way. Now, I have seen a common complaint that this is an unsatisfying ending to the story. They wish that the players managed to bring back Mollymauk, the character that died early on in the campaign, instead of this new incarnation. They felt like the reward for beating Lucian was not fully realized. Now, my 2 cents on this is that bringing Mollymauk back as Kingsley instead is a brilliant move and allows the party to have some sort of closure on this plot while also retaining the consequences of Mollymauk's death. Now, what do I mean by this and why do I say that? Why do I want Mollymauk to stay dead? Well, it's quite simple. I think Dungeons & Dragons, a lot of the time, lacks consequences. If you go back to the beginning of Critical Role Campaign 2, when Mollymauk passed, there was a lot that led up to that situation. The party were down a lot of key members, and they were going into a fight that was really, really difficult. They performed well, and tactically speaking, they were doing a great job early on, if I recall correctly, but later in the fight, Mollymauk uses his Blood Maledict right in front of a major melee fighting character and knocks himself out, resulting in this melee fighter killing him. And that was a really dramatic moment in the campaign. At the time, though, it was very shocking because that hadn't happened on the show before. And if I recall correctly, a lot of people were kind of upset by this. Not just because a player character died, that's normally very upsetting, but a lot of people felt like it was unneeded and that Mollymauk should have been brought back. I saw a lot of complaints about this. Well, maybe not a lot, but enough complaints that I noticed. However, the party didn't bring him back. Mollymauk stayed dead, and I thought that this was really great. His death was an amazing segue into the next chapter in the Mighty Nine story. He was a stepping stone on their hero's journey. His death pushed the group forward and gave them a future compelling arc. It was really amazing. His death brought the group together in a way, and it was their first step, in my opinion, one of their first steps into becoming the heroes that they are at the end of the campaign. Now, way later down the line, Matt Mercer brings Lucian into the picture, bringing Mollymauk back as the penultimate baddie. Now, I actually don't think that this is really a continuation of Mollymauk's story per se. Mollymauk's story, in my opinion, was done by that point. Mollymauk had brought the group together with his death and in a way completed his little character arc. Lucian was a new person that acted as the bad guy to the Mighty Nine. Now that they've come together as a party, the thing that brought them together is now trying to tear them apart. Mollymauk brought the group together, and now Lucian is the penultimate bad guy. It's a great wrap-up to the story. But Mollymauk's portion of the story is done. Lucian is more like an antagonist for the entirety of the Mighty Nine. He's not really a foil for Mollymauk particularly. Mollymauk's story is done, and he doesn't really have a bearing on this, which is why I don't think bringing Mollymauk back here would have worked. The consequences of Mollymauk's death are done. His arc is complete. Bringing him back here feels like just a footnote at the end of the campaign, a little extra reward that removes one of the only super consequential things that happened throughout the entirety of the campaign. Dungeons & Dragons has a big problem in the late game, and hell, even a bit in the mid game and early game when you have a cleric, with resurrections. Resurrections are really common in D&D, and Matt Mercer has gone out of his way to make them a bit more difficult in his games. Resurrections take more of a ritual in order to complete, and I know a lot of other Dungeon Masters do this because they feel like death is not consequential enough in D&D. When Mollymauk died, it was a storm of coincidences that led to him not only dying, but having no cleric around to resurrect him. It resulted in a permanent death, one of the only permanent deaths in the entire campaign, and Matt chose to leave it that way and to let that character remain dead. I'm sure Taliesin also had something to weigh in there and also chose to leave the character dead, and I think that that was the right call. It's not like it was impossible to bring him back. Matt could have had the party go on a quest to find a resurrection scroll or something along those lines to bring Mollymauk back to life. It's not completely unrealistic, but they chose to keep him dead, and I think that that was the right move. And similarly, at the end of the campaign, when it's all over, I think it was also the right move to allow the character to remain dead. Bringing back Mollymauk would have felt like a footnote, just a little thing at the end to reverse consequences and give the Mighty Nine a tacked-on reward, even though it doesn't really feel narratively cohesive. Kingsley, on the other hand, is building new life from an incarnation of a person that they loved previously. That, I think, is much, much better. Kingsley is a new person, and from what I've seen, I had to watch a bit of the episode to make this video, unfortunately, but from what I've seen, the interactions that the party had with this new Kingsley character are really, really compelling. He's a newborn adventurer, and the party, having been there themselves, can bring him into the fold, and it was really compelling to me. It allowed the Mighty Nine to go from rookies all the way to mentors at the very end. It completes this journey for them. And yeah, I thought that that was way better than the tacked-on resurrection of a character that had died literally over 100 episodes prior. Your party should panic at the concept of death, because that is the penultimate thing, the final ending. Death is supposed to be major in a story, and Dungeons & Dragons is kind of straying away from that at the higher levels just because of the natural way that resurrection spells work. Now, if I had to give some tips on how to avoid that, I would recommend implementing some resurrection rituals. If you're running a game where story is really important, then resurrection rituals will usually make resurrections a lot more of a strenuous process, or at least a tense process. Maybe strenuous is a bit too much of an extreme word, but definitely tense. Resurrections in my game, because of the ritual methods that I employ for the mechanics, they make resurrections a lot more tense on the players. High rolls are required from multiple people, and each and every roll feels really impactful to them. I can see the stress on their faces, and that is good. Death should be difficult for them to overcome in this sense, even with higher level spells. And even though they have literally succeeded every single time, the success felt more earned than if they just said, I cast Revivify, and then everything was okay. So yes, overall, that is what I take away from this. Consequences are important, and there's a little tip to implementing consequences into your own games. Overall, I think that this development in the Critical Role finale was really good. I think that it shows something in Dungeons & Dragons that I feel like is fading away sometimes, and I think that Matt Mercer did a great job in bookending the story of both the Mighty Nine and Mollymauk with this new character of Kingsley. If you guys enjoyed this episode of Tabletop Tavern Tips, please do leave a like. I do apologize that this one was a little bit more rambly and less organized, but sometimes that just is how it goes. If you guys want to see more of my content, then please do hit that subscribe button and subscribe to Crispy's Tavern. And finally, if you want to leave your own tips and thoughts, go down to the comments down below. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.